Hello, folks, and welcome to Virtual Club Passim. Thank you for tuning in tonight. It's exciting to be doing this show for you tonight because we are bringing you a brand new series to Club Passim. I'll tell you a bit about what you have in store tonight, but first I want to just go over a bit about Club Passim in case you aren't familiar with us. We have been a music venue and occasionally storytelling and poetry and comedy and dance venue as well in Harvard Square for over 60 years now. And we've been a nonprofit for the last 25 of those. And that's because of your support. It's because of you folks coming out and watching shows, coming to our little basement when it's safe to, that we are able to bring you shows 7 nights a week. And in addition to all the streaming shows that we've been able to bring you since March, when we've had to shut down in-person shows, of course, we also run a school of music that has moved online. We continue to run 2 grant programs this year that support local musicians and musicians in the greater Passim and folk communities. And it's all because of you and for you folks. So if you'd like to donate to help support Passim and our mission, as well as support our partners for the show tonight, Tell&Act, please go to passim.org/stream and you'll see a yellow donate button smack in the middle of your page. We're suggesting a $12 donation for watching the show tonight. If you can't give anything, that is fine. We want you here, we want you engaged, we want you enjoying the show. But also, if you can give, and if you'd like to support our mission, then please do give whatever you can. It is a big help, and it is truly the only way that artists have to make money these days. And we want to keep artists and the community engaged and paid until we are all able to be back in the same room together. So thank you again for tuning in tonight. I'd like to introduce our new series for tonight. Many of you watching are probably familiar with the Mass Mouth series that we used to host at Passim once a month, and we had a fantastic sending off party for them when they closed earlier this year. And this fall, we were thrilled to be able to bring you now a brand new storytelling series. I'm particularly excited about this series because tonight we're going to be talking to other producers of shows, and as kind of a producer myself, I'm excited to hear what these folks have to say about kind of the state of running shows right now and sharing some of their stories. But to tell you more about our new partners, Tell&Act, I'd like to welcome up co-founder Cheryl Hamilton. Hey, Cheryl.
Hey, Abby, thank you so much for having us. New partner, but longtime friend of Club Passim.
Indeed.
And everybody behind the scenes. I was thinking while you were talking, I was like, Abby could tell a story. She's a producer.
No.
So you wait, we'll get you up on screen at some point. I also want to thank everybody who's tuning in. Obviously, I'm a familiar face from Mass Mouth. If you didn't hear, Mass Mouth did unfortunately wrap up during COVID-19. But we are fully committed to making sure the stories and the art world continues, and we love supporting Club Passim, and we hope you will as well. We can't wait to be back in the basement enjoying the space and the French fries and the wine. Such good memories. But tonight we did sort of put together this series because there's so much amazing storytelling happening, and I guess the silver lining of COVID is that we've got people in Boston performing on shows in San Francisco. We've got people in DC on the virtual stages here in Boston. But that also means a lot of us who produce these shows are able to connect more, and we're talking more because of that. So we thought, why don't we get together and we'll tell some stories, but we'll also help you understand, like, how do I get on a stage, virtually or otherwise? How can I be attractive to someone who's producing a show? How can I not annoy them as a producer? We're going to most focus on the positives, though, but we've got a couple of tips. And I am so excited about the lineup tonight. We've got 5 producers / storytellers representing 4 institutions. Myself and Anna Willis-Collier from Tell&Act. Tell&Act is a new communications firm, who basically uses storytelling to be transformative, help transform businesses, help transform schools, personal lives, however you want to use storytelling. We believe storytelling can lead to really good action in your life. We're most recently for continuing to curate the Stories from the Stage over with World Channel and GBH, which you can watch online, and we'll talk more about that later. We also have Sue Schmidt, a producer with the Moth up in Vermont, and many other accolades we'll talk about. Cyndi Freeman from her home in New York City, who is a coach, an instructor, a producer with The Risk, amongst other programs, and my good friend Donna Galluzzo from Portland, Maine. And just, it's going to be a great night. But I want to get straight into the stories, and Abby's going to help me. So those of you that do slams, you know that as a producer, we're out back and we're pulling names for the next tellers, but I thought we should be put in the hot seat. We do not know the lineup. Abby's about to tell us the lineup. So Abby, from the top, she's going to pull all of them though, so we don't have to delay. Abby, who's number one?
Number one from my Café du Monde can is Cyndi.
Cyndi. Up to you.
Number two is Donna.
All right. Three.
Number three, Cheryl.
Oh, good. Right in the middle.
Number four is Anna. And that makes number five, Susanne.
All right, they're backstage. They're putting it up now, which is great. But again, these are, check out all of our social media links throughout the night. We're going to put the bios of each teller in the chat. So if you want to learn more about them, get links to their sites. But I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about each before they come up to stage. So Cyndi. I actually met Cyndi because she became my coach. I had the opportunity of performing on Risk, and as with many shows you do, you are often assigned a coach, and Cyndi was mine. And I cannot emphasize enough how helpful it is to have a coach, even if you think you are the absolute best storyteller, which there is still such value in someone listening to you because our stories are so close to us. We don't often think what someone else needs to hear. Cyndi then went on and she performed on Stories from the Stage in our holiday horror episode. You can watch that in season 1 of Stories from the Stage. She is a producer, a coach, an instructor with the Risk podcast and also their business arm called Story Studio. She is an amazing teacher, an amazing storyteller, just amazing human all over. And makes me think of the fact that her performance was on holiday horror. But this year, Stories from the Stage is doing our holiday show a little differently. It is not curated this year. We are actually, for the first time in 4 years, having an open slam. So if you are someone who has a story related to Thanksgiving or Christmas or New Year's and want to put your name in the virtual hat, go to Tell&Act.com. You'll see it on the front page and throw your name in the hat. But right now, I am so excited for you to hear from my former coach and friend and amazing producer, Cyndi Freeman.
Hey there. So my story, oh my gosh, my mother is my biggest fan, which doesn't mean she necessarily understands what I do as a person or an artist, but she is my biggest fan. One of the great examples of this, I had a date. Didn't go well. And my mother said, why? What happened? I said, hey, didn't really get my sense of humor. And she goes, so why is that important? You're not funny. And I said, Mom, I do stand up. I do comedy. I am funny. You don't always get my jokes. And she said, oh, you know what, honey? Next time you say something funny, you let me know and I'll laugh. Only a mother. She knows that I do storytelling. She often, when she can, she's 96 now, so not so much in the last couple of years, but she used to come to all my shows and say things like, why do you talk about such depressing things? And if I got good write-outs or I sold out a show, she'd be like, why does everybody want to listen to such depressing things? But despite it all, she would always tell me, never forget, I'm your biggest fan. And the time that this became the most obvious was in 1998. I was 32, she was 75, and we were heading off, or I was heading off to the Edinburgh Theatre Festival, the largest arts festival in the world. If you don't know what that is, it's literally like 2,500 shows, everyone from celebrities to high school students putting on a play. And I had come in there with a solo show, storytelling, very depressing, and I was doing great. I was getting really great write-ups. I was selling out. I was dealing with what I call the crisis of success, which means it was going so well, I was overwhelmed. and I was getting a lot of attention, and it was the UK. So a lot of that attention was coming from the press, who were behaving like the press in the UK, like the tabloids, like they were treating me like Angelina Jolie, which at the time, I'm a waitress who is doing a solo show. But there was this one gossip columnist from the Scotsman, and she was trying to figure out who was I hooking up with, which I will let you all know was nobody. And she was convinced it was everybody. Anyhow, so I'm dealing with reading this in the newspaper every single day. And then I got brought into this BBC TV show called Edinburgh Nights. And I'm excited, like I'm doing well. I got this like national TV show. And the second the cameras are on, the host turns to me and goes, I don't really like Americans. And I'm just like, okay. And then he tries to get me to defend all the policies and all the politics of my country. And I am like frozen. I hadn't prepared for this. This is not what my show's about. And afterwards, I called my mom and I'm crying. I'm just like, I was at a pub afterwards and I just needed a drink. And people were like, they saw it and they were just like, you look so scared. And he was so mean to you. Are you all right? I'm like, I'm on national television and people are scared for me. And my mom's like, that's it. I'm coming over. And I'm like, Ma, she goes, no ifs or buts. I am coming over. I am calling the flight tomorrow. And I didn't argue with her because honestly, I really kind of wanted my mommy. So anyhow, my mom is coming over, and it coincides nicely with the fact that I was doing my second radio interview with a radio host who liked Americans. I said, do you mind? My mom's coming in the morning. Can she sit in the green room? And he's like, you have a mother. Is she like something from The Nanny? By the way, my British accents are terrible, so deal with it. And I'm like, she's sort of like from The Nanny. He goes, excellent. So we're going to send her off to we'll have a review in the art gallery. How's that? She can review it. And I was like, oh, okay. So my mom comes in, and what my mom didn't know is that I had run into the gossip columnist the night before, and on advice from my publicist who said, tell her anything that has to do with you not like hooking up with people. I had told her my mom was coming in, and she was like, really? I'm like, yes. And so as I greeted my mother, oh my God, and I still have it. As I greeted my mother, I told her, Mom, you're in the newspaper. And there was an article about how my mother was coming on a belated rescue mission. And my mother's like, why am I news? I'm like, I don't know, but we have to get on the radio. So they send us off to this art gallery, which we do. And then we get to the radio station, and it's me and my mom and a jazz musician and the host and the curator from the art gallery. And the host starts with the curator, and he's like, so tell us about your art exhibit. And she's like, well, it's jewelry as art. We got artists from all over the world, interpret, as bold as you can, jewelry as artwork. And he turns to my mother, so Mona, you saw this, what did you think? And she was like, oh, it was very interesting. Very interesting. And he's like, well, you're reviewing it. You can say more. And she says, well, it was creative, and look, I wouldn't wear any of it. I wouldn't put it on my wall. And the curator just like gets all huffy. And she's like, well, I don't think you understand. And my mother, you don't do this to a Jewish mother, because my mom just looks at her and lets her go on and then says, oh, please, I'm going to tell you what I tell my children. I got 3 that are artists. Do what you want. It's a free world. Doesn't mean I'm going to like it. Doesn't mean I'm going to put it on my wall. And with this stuff, doesn't mean I'm going to wear it. She then goes on to the curator and says, there's that whole jewelry of the future piece with the bug pheromones where you're supposed to attract bugs to your sweater. Would you wear bugs? She turns to the host, would you wear bugs? By the time she's done, they're all agreeing no one wants to wear bugs. The host is thrilled. So this was a huge success, and we leave. And that night after my show, we hit the bars, and my mother doesn't usually go to bars, but she comes with me, and everyone beelines right past me to my mother. We heard you on the radio. You must be Cindy's mother. Can I get you a glass of wine? And you're so funny. And nobody had ever told my mother she was funny before. So she's like, oh. And this goes on all week long. Everywhere I go, my mom's famous, and I am free to focus on my show. Well, the last night we went to a party. The gossip columnist was there. I said, Ma, come here, sit down there, talk to that lady. And then I went off the next day to get her to the airport. We picked up a newspaper at the airport, and the headline said, Curse of the Mummy, no. Mrs. Freeman is the toast of the festival, smart set. And my mother said, okay, I get it. I get it. I get why you do this. This was the most fun I've ever had in my life. Well, I got home about a week after her. I sent all the clippings to the Boston Globe, and Names and Faces outdid themselves with an article about how my mother was more famous than I was. And I called her. I said, "Did you see it?" And she said, "How did we find out about this?" I'm like, "I don't know. I guess a little bird must have sent them all the press clippings." I'm like, "Did you call your friends?" And she says, "Oh, please, don't be tacky. I didn't call my friends." I'm like, "Oh." And she goes, "But don't worry, they all saw it. My phone has been ringing off the hook. This has been a very fun day."
I love that story so much. Thank you, Cyndi. Oh, I just want to hear everybody else like cheering and clapping and laughing and giggling. Cyndi, I was thinking while you were talking that my mom is kind of like your mom. Like, she's behind the scenes, but likes to, occasionally peek out. My mom actually once was in the Boston Globe in the editorial session. She just wrote to tell the Boston Globe that she had gone grocery shopping with my 3-year-old niece, and one of the cashiers found out it was my niece's birthday and broke into song and sang happy birthday with some operatic over-the-top delivery, but it made their day. So your mom was in a much bigger way and mine in a small little way. I also had to laugh at your British accent comment. Like, that's not my British accent. As you all know, if you have not met her yet and soon will, Anna is from England. So my partner in crime has a British accent, and now I can't even pretend to do one around her because it's just mortifying. But she is so much fun, and she teaches me wonderful expressions. But thank you, Cyndi. As you can all tell, this is why I love working with Cyndi. She's an amazing teller. And again, any of us offer coaching. So reach out to us if you're working on a new piece or reviving an old work. Again, the information is all in the chat section. You can find people's contact information. But speaking of mom stories, it's appropriate that Donna is up next because Donna Galluzzo performed my mother's favorite story ever. She did a story on Stories from the Stage. This is Donna Galluzzo from Portland, Maine, in the School Days episode about her early days being a teacher. And Donna and I met 20 years ago, and in that 20 years, she has had many wonderful careers. I met her when she was teaching photography at a school in Portland, Maine. She has been an instructor. She's been an executive director of different nonprofits. She currently is in real estate. And through all of that, somehow finds time to also produce an amazing storytelling show called Sound Bites. It currently is not doing live shows, but you can listen to the Sound Bites podcast in the link that we're putting in the chat right now. So without further ado, my friend and fabulous storyteller, Donna Galluzzo.
Hey, thanks, Cheryl. I love you like crazy, so thank you for all that great love. Well, I'm going to switch it up a little bit tonight. I usually tell a lot of mom stories, but I'm going to talk about my dad. And I'm going to start by saying that, sadly, in March of 2017, my mom passed. And right before she passed, she basically let my brother and I know that my dad didn't seem quite right. And she just kept insisting something was wrong. And once she did finally leave this earth, my brother and I really quickly realized that my dad definitely had some progressing dementia, Alzheimer's. We weren't sure what it was, but it was much more serious than what we had thought it was. And once we realized that, we thought to ourselves, okay, he can't live alone anymore. That just isn't possible. I was living up in Maine. My brother was living and is still living in South Carolina. And my dad was living alone in Florida. And we knew that just wasn't a good situation. So we gave him some choices about where he could go. And we finally wound up moving him to South Carolina, Charleston area. And my brother and I selected this amazing assisted living facility. And we thought, this is great. He's going to have some independence. He's going to be really close to my brother, and we can keep an eye on him. Well, after a few months, we very quickly realized his situation was rapidly changing, and we knew he needed more care than assisted living could provide. And so I went down to South Carolina, and we vetted some places, and essentially we found a new place for him with much deeper level of care. And so we orchestrated a move. I went back down again for the moving date. And when the move actually came, we divvied up our tasks, and we decided that my brother, because he was from the area, would be the one who would work with the movers and get all the stuff that was my father's from facility A to facility B. And we were excited about this new facility, not only for the level of care, but because my dad could still have a private room, which was very important to him. And then we decided that I would stay behind and I would help Dad settle in. And I would meet with the administrators and try to help make that first day in his new space more familiar. And I would go through the day with him as much as possible. Now, if any of you have ever dealt with a relative dealing with memory loss, dementia, Alzheimer's, it's tough. And while dementia presents very differently in all different kinds of people, to me, there's something that I've noticed, as a trend as we were dealing with it, that there comes a point, I think, when people have kind of it's almost a vacant look. It's not quite the right word, but the life that you have behind your eyes when you talk, the animation, the facial expression, something at some point seems to be missing in that. And so here we are in a new place with my dad, and everyone in this new care facility is struggling with some kind of memory issue, whether it's a form of dementia or Alzheimer's. And the administrator suggests that I go to lunch with my dad on the first day there. And at this point, my father is nonverbal. He can talk a little bit, and he knows who we are. He was very confused about what time era he was living in. But we go to lunch, and we go, he's in a wing in this facility, and each wing has its own private dining area. And they try to make the dining area, I think, feel somewhat homey and familiar. So it's a little institutional, but also a little homey. There's these card tables kind of set up with 4 people sitting at a table, and each table has a tablecloth and real silverware and real place settings. And then there's a charge nurse who's kind of stands up in a position sort of on a podium overlooking everybody. And she's just looking at everyone. And I think her job is just to make sure, I assume, people aren't choking or there isn't some hazard afoot that we don't know about. And then the other nurses and attendings are basically there bringing the food in and out, interacting with the residents. But essentially, you're in this dining area with 6 or 8 card tables, so 4 top for those of you who've been in the wait industry. And so you've got 25 people in a room. Coincidentally, they're all women, except for my dad, all women. But they all have some kind of severe memory issue. So that vacancy, that vacant look, that nonverbal piece is very common. So you would expect 25 women having lunch, you would expect it to be the most boisterous din of voices that you could ever think of, right? It would be exciting and chit chat, and not that at all. The complete opposite. It was so quiet. It was uncomfortably quiet. So I think a lot of us who do this sort of thing, especially those of us who tell stories, I'm an extrovert. I'm a glaring extrovert. So this whole idea of sitting in this room of people with memory challenges who are very nonverbal and kind of have they're at that level of vacant look, and maybe no one is saying anything. It is awkwardly quiet. I don't do well with awkward quiet. I have to make small talk with an inanimate object if it comes to that. I have got to have conversation, especially at a meal. You can tell by my last name, I'm Italian. So like mealtime means conversation time. And I'm struggling with this. I'm struggling with the food. I mean, obviously it was very struggling for my dad. Just hard seeing him there nonverbal, but I'm trying to think, who can I talk with? How can I make conversation? And it's painful getting a question answered, but I'm trying to talk to the woman sitting across from me and sort of learning places that she's lived in life. And I get out that I live in Maine, and then there's another table that I can see behind her, like it's within my eyesight. And there's a woman at the table over there, and she turns around, looks at me, kind of cocks her head, puts her hand up, very, very animated, and she said, hello. And I say, hello. And she says, I have a son. And I say, well, that's great. And she says, his name is Michael. And I say, oh, wonderful. She says, do you know him? And I say, no, I don't know him. And she says, he's very big in the church. And I say, no, actually, I'm not from here. And so I don't attend any services here. So I'm sorry to say I don't know your son. And then just as if on cue, she looks away, goes back to eating, or again, sort of that vacant stare ahead. And I don't hear from Michael's mom for a little while. Still trying to make chit chat, still painfully quiet. Another long silence lapses, and hand goes up again. And Michael's mom whips her head around and she says, hello. And I say, hello. And she's like, I have a son. And I say, yes, his name is Michael, right? And she says, oh my God, she's so excited. Do you know him? And I say, no, I don't know him. And she says, he's very big in the church. Are you sure you don't know him? And I say, no, I'm not from here. I didn't grow up in South Carolina. I don't go to any services here. I'm just visiting my dad. And that's it. And back again, she goes to retreat. More long, painful, awkward silence. My dad's still not really eating. Again, I'm like, I just can't even think of a question to ask anybody. And it's dead quiet. And then, once again, Michael's mother whips around. The hand comes up and cock the head. She looks at me and she says, hello. And I say, hello. And she says, I have a son. And I say, yes, Michael. He's in the church, right? And she gets even more excited this time. Oh my God, you must know him. So you know him. And I say, no, gosh, I don't know him. I'm sorry. I'm not from here. I'm from Maine, but I'm very happy that your son Michael is big in the church, but I can't say that I know him. And Michael's mom turns away, and that is that. So the administrator of the facility comes in and she says to me, hey, your dad's not really eating much lunch, but let's give him a little time. See if you leave and come chat with me, maybe he'll actually eat something. And so we disappear around the corner, and we're, sitting in this little lounge right outside the dining hall, and people are finishing up, and I can tell they're finishing up because they're all passing by. I can see the women walking by, those who are ambulatory, or wheeling by if they're not ambulatory. And what was really sweet was, even though most of the women in the room seemed, again, not to be engaging with each other at all, or very clear or engaged with current things happening in current time, oddly enough, a few of them stopped by and poked their head, over the rail and looked in the lounge. And one of them said to me, the minute you left the room, your dad started eating. I don't even know if that was true or not, but it was so sweet. It was so sweet that that she bothered to say that. And then another person came up and poked her head over the rail, and she said, don't worry about your dad. We're going to take good care of him, which was also really adorable and comforting. So that made me feel wonderful. I finished talking to the administrator, and I go back into the dining hall, and now it's just me and my dad, and sitting at the same table. And then the card table across the way has Michael's mom. She's still there. And it looks as though maybe my dad's eaten, but again, not really sure. Getting ready to take him back to his room. Once again, Michael's mom cocks her head, looks over at me. It's just the three of us. There's no nurse there, no attendings, nothing. Waves the hand. Hello. I thought, oh gosh, here we go again. We're starting out the same. And I say, hello. And she says, can I tell you something? Oh, this is exciting. We're moving in a different direction. So I immediately walk over and I stand right next to her and I say, absolutely. What did you want to say to me? And she looks up at me and she says, well, I just want to tell you you are devastatingly handsome. And I didn't know what to say, but it was a compliment. She could have said, you are the ugliest person I've ever seen. I don't know. So I just rolled with it. And I said, well, thank you so much. That's so nice of you to say. And then she looked down and looked up again, and she said, no, really. I mean, you are handsome. And once again, I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to roll with this. A compliment is a compliment. I'm going to take it. So I'm looking down at her. And in that moment, it was almost like, literally like someone flipped a switch. And when she looked up at me next, her face was really different. Like her eyes had a different energy behind them. Her facial expressions were very different. And there was something about the way she was engaging me that seemed like, this must have been this woman 10 or 15 years ago, you know? And she looked up at me and she said, you know, since my Michael was this little, I knew he was that way, and it broke my heart. And I thought, wow, in my head, like, what a big thing to reveal to me. And I said, well, it sounds like you really love him, though. And she said, oh, yeah, I do. That's what you do as a parent. You know, your kids choose a path or become someone, or, you know, do something that you don't expect, and it can break your heart. But as a parent, you just have to work through that, and you just have to love them anyway. And then it was like someone flipped the switch, and she went back to that vacant person that she was. And when I thought about everything that had transpired, and, you know, where I was at with my dad and just where he was at in his life, I realized two things. One, that I was the person who really needed to hear that. So that was for me, and not for Michael. It was really for me. And the other thing I thought was, I really hope that Michael knows how much his mother loves him wherever he is. So, thank you.
Donna, thank you. I was just reflecting on the fact that we kind of made a decision when putting the show together that as producers, we always, before we curate a show, we talk to all the storytellers, we hear all the stories many times, we think about the lineup, we think about the mix of subjects and tone and personalities. And this time we decided as producers, we'd give ourselves a break and we just threw our names in a hat. Donna, that was incredible. And I'm thinking about my mother and my father. And because I know Donna well, I was actually, I had the privilege of being on the steps of City Hall in Portland, Maine, when she and her partner became the first gay couple married in Maine. As someone in the comments said, all the feels. So thank you. You did make me laugh, though, when you said about the I'm not someone that's quiet. Also true about Donna and also true about myself. And I was like, yeah, the quiet in that room would have been really hard for me. So thank you for that levity also. I also was thinking about how I'm sure by now, since we're all home and watching a lot of YouTube, everybody has to have seen by now the beautiful viral video going around with the ballet dancer from New York City who had music played for her that she used to dance to, and her whole body came alive. It is, if you have not seen it, you need to hunt that down after tonight's show. But again, thank you. If you would like to follow more of Donna, she again is the producer of Sound Bites. It's a program out of Portland, Maine, also Brunswick, travels a little bit at a great venue called Frontier. That's where I first was blessed to join the stage, and she's a great host. She has this wonderfully calming presence. So now I have to follow that. So they're going to drop my bio in the chat. You can read it at your leisure, but I'm going to also, though, tell a story from Maine. So I am standing in my middle school cafeteria, but I am not a middle school student. In fact, I'm 27 years old, and I am here for the historic Democratic caucus in 2008. and the room is electric. Organizers are telling us that there are 4 times as many people stuffed into this room where I used to eat peanut butter jelly sandwiches and pizzas. And I'm here with my mom because my mom's kind of shy and a little reserved, and I'm not. And she called me and said, would you come with me to this caucus? Because I don't actually live in Maine. I'm in Baltimore at the time, but I'm just curious enough that I fly up and I attend with her. Now, I didn't know what one should wear to a caucus, particularly one of such importance at a historic time. And I'm also in Maine, so I decide that the appropriate outfit is a pair of jeans and boots, matched with a black shirt and a black blazer and an Obama sticker. And as I stand in this room and I look around, I see people that I went to high school with. I see people who are friends of my brothers, friends of my parents. My mom's best friend is sitting next to her in the back row and they're giggling like schoolgirls. I see teachers, I see neighbors. It is like a homecoming. And as I'm looking at the room, all of a sudden, all these volunteers and organizers come up to the front and they start explaining how the caucus is going to work. Because it turns out most people had never been to a caucus. They have no idea. But it sounds not unlike the first day of school because they say they're going to divide all of us up into a home room. And there we will vote for our favorite candidate. My mom gets assigned the gymnasium, which is conveniently right behind us. I decide to linger near the back so I can watch the dynamics of the room as they went through a bunch of other important announcements. Every time they mention that the vote is coming up, people are screaming and exciting. People have posters and signs, and it's electric. But I notice there's one guy in the corner, and he just keeps looking at me. And my mom notices too, and her best friend. And her best friend says, he's kind of cute. Now, I'm single at the time, and my parents would love nothing more for me to be married, but I ignore it. But then I catch his attention again. And when the group is done this whole explanation and they start telling us to be dismissed like the bell rang, he makes a beeline towards me. And he says, hello, are you with Obama's party? And I was like, excuse me? He's like, yeah, with the campaign team. And I said, no, why do you ask? He goes, oh, well, the blazer and the button. And I say, oh no, I don't know. I thought I should dress up and I am supporting Obama. He says, well, do you like politics? And well, that's an easy question. I love politics. In fact, I first ran for student council in this middle school. I had the coolest posters ever. My older brother, an artist, he made gigantic pictures of Pepsi Cola bottles. And rather than write Pepsi, he put Hamilton, the choice for a new generation. And it was a lot of fun. I went on to run for office for many more things in high school. I went off and studied political science. After I graduated, I traveled to England where I worked as a member of parliament on peace policies. I even ran a campaign with a friend in a part of East Cornwall. And through all of this, I thought about office. And as I start thinking about this, he interrupts me and he says, you know, I saw you shaking a lot of hands. It does seem like you know a lot of people. And I said, yeah, I just got back. You know, I'm visiting and saying hello to folks. And he said, have you thought about running for office? Have I thought about running for office? Again, only since I was in the school. You see, I come from a long family of politicians. My cousins and my uncles have been senators and governors, worked in DC and New Hampshire and Maine. Even my brother recently told me that my brother's a historian, and he said that he found out that my family is related to the first Supreme Court Justice, John Marshall. So politics, yes, I've thought about it. But instead I say to him, I guess so, really casually. And he says, well, here's the thing. I know I'm just met you, but we just learned that the woman who is supposed to run for state representative in this district has to withdraw. And we're looking for someone to replace her. And the party has decided that this is the year to invest in women and particularly young women and nurture them into politics. And I just feel like you're smart and sociable. You might be interested. Excuse me, is what I'm thinking inside. But then he continues and he says, and the best thing about it is that it is an uncontested seat. You put your name on the ballot and you are in office. I lost him after uncontested. This gentleman has just told me that if I put my name on a ballot, it is going to very shortly end up on a plaque in Augusta at the State House. And maybe, just maybe, if I work really hard, it could be in DC or maybe the White House. I am daydreaming like crazy when suddenly I hear my mom yell, "Cheryl, the voting's starting." And I catch myself and I said, that's hilarious. So here's the thing. I can't run for office. I live in Maryland. I don't have a job in Maine. This is crazy. And he says, it's not a problem. You see, we'll help you get a job, and your mom's already here, so use her address. It's not a big deal. And I laugh again nervously, and I said, I gotta go. And he said, please, see me after this caucus, and we'll just talk. You can tell me all the reasons this is crazy, and I will tell you all the reasons you're wrong. I rush off into the gymnasium, and it looks like there's a dodgeball game happening. Like half the people are at one end supporting Clinton, the other half, equally numbered, are at the other end. And there's this one guy at the half court line who clearly knows who he is voting for. But he's standing there anxiously because he says he thinks that we should really embrace this caucus experience. And he's asking people at both ends of the gymnasiums to yell out the reasons that he should pick Clinton or Obama. 10 minutes later, he saunters over to Obama's side, and that side erupts in excitement. My mom's on the Obama side. I have a sticker. I didn't vote. I stood aside. A few hours later, I'm back with my parents in our living room, and we're talking about the day. My mom's telling my dad about it, and I tell them about this conversation. My mom is like, what? She thought the guy was like, flirting with me. Then my dad says, I'm sorry, you for office? To which I remind him that his family has a long history of running for offices. And then I say to my mother, maybe he was flirting, but Mom, actually, when I was in London, I took several workshops on campaigning. And in many of them, they talked about how in campaigning, you should flirt with your constituencies. It's not that different. You walked up to them confidently, you ask about their lives, you validate their feelings, and then you ask for their vote. So maybe he was flirting, but he asked me to run for office. Now I'm at a bar downtown a few hours later, and it is a complete snowstorm. And I'm sitting with this gentleman, and again, he's asking why I can't run for office. And I repeat the same reasons. I add things like money. I don't have any, and it costs a lot. But then I get serious. And I say to him, sir, I can't run for office because the last time I was in Maine, I ran a refugee resettlement program welcoming Somali immigrants to the city after 9/11, and it was controversial. It ended up in the national news, frankly, international news. And although a lot of people were really welcoming, others told me that I brought terrorists to this town. Some said I was a mud lover, and a lot of people I don't think would vote for me. And he says, well, again, it's an uncontested seat. Plus, we'll just talk about your family history. Are your family immigrants? And I said, yeah, my grandfather's from Ireland, my grandmother's from Canada. And he's like, see, perfect. And as he continues on his debate, a gentleman walks by who I swear to God could have been wearing been on the front cover of LL Bean magazine. He's got the plaid shirt and the vest and the jeans and the boots. And the guy stops him and he says, sir, would you vote for this woman for state representative? And he looks me up and down like I'm Sarah Palin. And he goes, yeah, she's cute enough. And now I feel like Sarah Palin. Except then the guy next to me, he says, well, I actually thought she was kind of hot. The other guy laughs and walks off. Now, I'm cute. I look like a Cabbage Patch Kid, but hot? I then find myself in that position that many women find themselves in when you want to say something offensive, but you also have to navigate this really uncomfortable moment and you can't think lightning fast. So what you do is you giggle and you say, funny, sir, you did invite me here to run for office, right? And he says, oh, of course. But as he says this, he pulls a phone out of his pocket and he clicks a button. And then he slides it across the bar to me, and it's a picture of a woman. And he says, but I also wanted to know if you'd like to have a threesome with my wife. 12 years later, I'm sitting on my couch in Boston, where I've been eating Halloween candy for comfort food for 5 days, watching the decimal points decide whether President Trump will be reelected or will have Obama and Harris in the White House. And as I sit there, I think about the last 12 years and how, particularly for the people I work with who are immigrants and refugees, how their life has been a roller coaster. One administration saying that they were welcome and they should feel a sense of belonging and an opportunity. The other administration shutting them out and even putting them in cages. I think about the women who for a moment saw the glass ceiling just about to crack. And I think that even though I voted for Obama. And then I think about the way that I felt on election night, like a gut punch, the way that Trump talked about women. But then in the middle of it, I see John Kelly and Wolf yell that Biden has been the president-elect, and I start crying. I start crying so quickly, it's like overwhelming. And in fact, I cry so much that I pick up my phone, I start texting my mom who was at the caucus with me, and then remember that she died last year. That's how much I wanted to tell her that this country had taken a huge step forward. But then my husband turns to me and he's teared up a little too, but he says something that surprises me. He says, you know, Cheryl, I don't know if this is as surprising for men as women, because I think we've seen more women advance over the years. Are you as surprised? I'm sorry, am I surprised that a woman who's a daughter of immigrants and a woman of color has just been elected to vice president? Yeah, as surprised as that man's comment sitting at the bar. And I think about that man, and I think about all the things he said that was wrong that day. But there was one thing he said that was right, or could have been. Maybe a white woman who's young, without a job, and in the wrong state could have been elected to office. But that's not how I would have wanted to win. I would have wanted to win like I won vice presidency in 7th grade, and not just with some random name on a ballot. Thank you. Now I feel like I need some wine. I don't think the host should introduce the next person, but I'm excited to introduce the next person. Following me is another wonderful woman who actually performed in a show that I produced called Suitcase Stories. So refugee and immigrant stories are really important to me, given some of the work that I do. And there's a show called Suitcase Stories. You can read about it on my website. And I randomly called Sue Schmidt and I said, hey, Sue, would you come and do this show? And Sue doesn't know this, but I actually didn't know she lived in Vermont at that point. And she said yes. And then at the show, she said she had to drive back 3 hours to Vermont. So if that doesn't show you what kind of committed storyteller she is, I don't know what does. But Sue Schmidt is the producer for The Moth up in Vermont. She also has her own program called Say It Forward, which helps organizations and businesses craft their stories. She is a mother of 2 amazing boys. She just told their story, a related story on Stories from the Stage, where she has performed twice. She's a comedian. She's just a lovely human. And it is my extreme pleasure to introduce Sue. Oh, wait a second. Is Sue next? Yes. No. Did I just mess that up? Oh, shoot. I think Sue's last. Anna, are you on deck? Hey, Abby, I need your help. Let that up.
Officially, Anna is next, but since you just did that lovely intro, I say we go right along with Sue.
This is what happens when you produce and host and tell. You shouldn't do it. Anna, I will say the best.
Yeah, Sue looks ready backstage, so
right.
So let's just go ahead and bring her on.
Thanks, all.
Cheryl, I love you. I love that. I love being a producer, especially in these moments, and still sort of reeling from Cheryl's story. But I'm also going to tell you a story about middle school. So if you're looking for a perfect example of a bell curve, look no further than the 1974 Ralph J. Osgood Middle School chorus. So on the high end of this perfect curve, you have kids that can really sing and love to sing. And on the low end, you have kids that can't really sing and love to sing. But most of the curve is in that middle. And that middle section is kids that can kind of sing, but just don't really bother to learn the words. So before you judge me for my perfect participation in this middle section, let me tell you that there were not a lot of choices for girls in the 70s in middle school for electives. One was typing, and honestly, I just didn't think that keyboarding was going to be an important skill. I know I missed that. And the other was home ec. And following the investigation into the souffle explosion, folks asked me not to return to that class. So there I am. I'm in middle school chorus, and I've got to figure out some plan of how I'm going to get through this. And so I devised what is now widely recognized as the reverbial delay method. And how this works is I would pair myself up with a kid on the high end of that perfect curve. And I would wait for them to sing their note, and then I would just jump in right behind them. Oh, say, can, you, see, bye, don, light. And I felt like this added enormous depth to the chorus. And in truth, most of the kids loved it. The kids on the high end were like, we've never been so popular. And the kids in the middle were like, please teach us how to do this. And the kids at the low end couldn't really tell what they were singing, so it didn't really matter. And there was this one girl, Lisa Klempner. She was like the head of the Mean Girls. And she called me out one day after rehearsal, and she said, she's cheating to Mr. Stentz, the music teacher. And Mr. Stentz looked at her and said, okay, it's middle school chorus. There's no cheating in middle school chorus. And Mr. Stentz was the guy that was paid by the New York City Board of Education to actually have me learn the words. And the look on his face was like, are you kidding? So this reverbial delay method worked perfectly for 2 full seasons of chorus until the winter concert when O Tannenbaum was on the program. Now, as it turns out, kind of secondary gain, I hadn't planned on this, the reverbial delay method is multilinguistic. So by the time I was in 6th grade, I could speak 9 different languages. And so the problem was, at the end of the concert, we got back to my grandmother's house, who was there in the audience, and she was so moved to see me sing in her native language that she said, oh, Susan, please sing that again. And my brother, who was at the table and knew about the reverbial delay method, and as older brothers go, was always just sort of waiting for the opportunity to take me down, looked at me and said, yes, Susan, please sing that again. I think we'd all like to hear it. And so I started out strong and I said, O Tannenbaum, O Tannenbaum. And then I just kind of faded out. Hab kein Lederhosen. My father, who was also there, and like most fathers in the 70s, kind of always had that look on his face like, I'm not really clear what my role is. I'm going to show up, but I don't really understand what I'm supposed to do as a parent. This was the moment he decided he was going to dial in. And he leaned over and he said to me, I just want to clarify what I think I heard you sing. Oh, Christmas tree, I have no traditional German pants. That was indeed exactly what I had sung, because those were the 4 words that I knew in German, and I thought rather creatively had strung those together to create a sentence. Now, luckily, my grandmother had started to lose her hearing by this point. And so it gave my father the opportunity to say, why don't we sing something we all know the words to? Let's sing Edelweiss. And my brother and I just couldn't resist that. Edelweiss was part of our family song. It reminded us of the time we had picked my grandmother up, the only visit she had ever made back to Germany. We picked her up at JFK, and the second she got into our VW microbus and we slammed that door closed, she sat down and she pulled out of the inner sleeve of her coat pocket this tiny little piece of burlap. And it had one little sprig of a flower coming up out of it. And she opened my hand and she placed it in there and she said, Wohlblumen, Edelweiss. My father looked horrified and he was like, Mom, you smuggled, which was not something my grandmother would do. And again, remember, in the 70s, you could bring pretty much any incendiary device on a plane, light your cigarette while you were waiting for the knife that you would cut your Salisbury steak with. But you could not bring any kind of plant back into the country. And she said, yes, I smuggled across 3 continents. And so the way home on the Belt Parkway, we just broke into song, and we sang Edelweiss, and we sang pretty much every single song from The Sound of Music, which I did know all of the words to. My brother, of course, lending his unique interpretation, my favorite one of which was, how do you solve a problem like my sister? I'm going to spit on her head while I hold her down. The next morning, we got up, and my grandmother and I planted that tiny little sprig of Volblumen in her back garden. And over the next several years, she just cultivated that, and it started to blossom into the most extraordinary bed of these tiny little white flowers that would bloom every spring. And in the summertime, when we were done with all of the gardening, we would sit in that back bed of these little Volblumen, and she'd tell me stories about Germany. And she would tell me about hiking in the Black Forest with her mother and picking mushrooms and cooking them with her father. And my favorite story, the story of when in 1920, her mom died. And when her father remarried, her stepmother just woke up one morning and said, "You're done here," and packed all of her belongings into a steamer trunk, rowed her down to the boat to America, put her on it. And she shows up at Ellis Island, not knowing anyone, not speaking any English, and she starts a new life. When my grandmother died, my brother and I, as most families do, sort of cleaned out her house. And in the back of one of her closets, we found the exact steamer trunk that she had brought over with her. And there was a bunch of old clothes in there and some pictures. And in the bottom of the trunk was this box, a package, and the postmark was dated 10 years before she had died. And the return address said Mühlacker, Germany, which is the town that she was born in. And so my brother and I just instantly knew, out of deep respect, that my grandmother did not want this package opened. And so we didn't for about 15 seconds. And then we just ripped into that thing. And inside the package was a kind of moldy can of jam, some pictures of people we didn't know, a letter with the breadth and width of my German skills. I interpreted that everyone was fine. Their pants were all intact, but couldn't really tell much more from the letter. And one of the pictures on the back said Adolf Kling, 1940. And it was a picture of my grandmother's eldest brother in a Nazi uniform. My grandmother was not a Holocaust denier, but she never talked about her time after she left Germany. And I thought, is this why she was so disconnected from the country that she loved? And so I took that picture and I sat out in the back garden of Volblumen. And I sat there for a long time. I don't even know how many hours it was, but it was long enough for me to come to the understanding that if you want a perfect example of a bell curve, you need look no further than your own life. Because on the one end, on the high end, the things that we get from our families are incredible. And if we care for them and cultivate them, they will blossom into a foundation that we can pass down for generations. And on the other end, the low end, there are things that are so horrific and so hurtful and so shameful that we have to hide them away in the darkest corners. But most of our lives live solidly in the middle of that curve, where we are just humming along, hoping nobody realizes we don't know the words. Thanks.
Oh, Sue, thank you so much. And thank you for jumping in as number 4. We're a supportive group. Someone did text me to say, have you drank yet or you plan on drinking? I've just started. But our last teller before we open up to the dialogue is Anna Willis-Collier, who's my partner in crime at Tell&Act. But I want to say before I introduce her, if anybody helps me out in the chat, there was a woman recently that was interviewed on NPR who talked about how she loved The Sound of Music, but she did not know for many years that there were 2 acts, because she had 2 VHS tapes, or a VHS tape, and she didn't know there was a part 2. And it was this very interesting dialogue about, if you hadn't seen part 2, what would you have thought of Sound of Music? And she struggled with it when she saw. So I don't know if anybody remembers it, put it in the chat. But thank you, Sue. You are a wonderful partner in the storytelling world. And thank you for going the distance, literally and figuratively, to be on shows. Now, thank you for also jumping in. Anna. Anna is the co-director of Tell&Act, the organization that I run with her. And she had burst on the scenes here in Boston a few years ago with this unbelievable story about dyslexia. She made it to our Grand Slam finale at Mass Mouth and became so well known that it got picked up, and she actually traveled back to her country in England to have it featured and talk about the importance of supporting people with dyslexia and better understanding it on the BBC. She has since burst on other stages. She's been on The Moth, Stories from the Stage, where she actually coaches and helps other people prepare for stories. She's an educator, a mom, just an incredible person. And so, Anna, I apologize for throwing you in the works, but I'm so glad you're closing out the show. Before we bring Anna on, I want to remind those that are watching, we're now going to open up after Anna to a Q&A. So if you have questions for any of the tellers about what their storytelling experience or their producing, we want to hear from you, and you could throw those in the chat. But let's close out with an amazing story from my friend Anna.
Hi, everybody. I'm honored to follow on from you all and to be the last person. I'm not worthy. Yes, I'm British, but I can't do an American accent. So there we go. My story. I am 30 years old and I am giddy with excitement because I live in the US, but I am getting to go back to the UK for the first time with my 4-month-old baby son, Oscar. And I'm so excited because this will be the first time that most of my family and all of my friends in the UK will get to meet Oscar. I am also deliriously tired because I have a 4-month-old baby and I don't remember the last time I slept. I kind of have a case of the baby blues, which is kind of painful. And I'm also jet lagged because I just got off a plane with the baby a few hours before. But I walk into the living room where my mum and dad live, and my mum and dad are there, and my sister and my friend Faye. My friend Faye, I haven't seen in like a bunch of years, and she's driven from the other side of the UK to come and see me and meet Oscar. And I open the door, and they're all there. They all know each other, and they're all sort of chirping between themselves. And Oscar is there in his car seat sleeping, and I do this. I go, and which basically means I don't want to interrupt anybody, and does anybody want a cup of tea or coffee? And we're kind of used to this. And I look around the room and people are going, yeah, you know, tea, coffee, and I'm making the tally. And I look around the room and I get to Faye and I look at her and she's like as if, come on, Anna. And I'm like, oh. And because I'm deliriously tired, I'd forgotten. She doesn't drink tea or coffee, kind of a bit of a freak, actually. But she only drinks water. So there I am. And I'm like, W, it's just not coming to me. And she sort of pulls like a sort of amused, dry smile and sort of nods. And then my dad goes, oh, look, everybody, look, it's the dyslexic chef, can you see? And I'm looking at Faye, and I see registering on her face, what the fuck? And I don't know what registers on my face, but all I know is I feel like I have been sucker punched in my gut. And I kind of sort of step back, turn around and walk into the kitchen, and my cheeks feel like they've been clawed and they're red and burning, and I feel tears welling up and I start to have a bit of a sob. And Faye comes into the kitchen and she's like, Anna, what the fuck? I thought your dad was really nice. He's like, I just thought he was nice. What? And I'm like, well, yeah, he kind of is very nice to lots of people, but he's also an asshole. And I explained to her that for much of my life, my dad has, as much as I love him, he has been the meanest person to me verbally. He has done everything he can to put me down. I could do nothing right, like nothing. We're talking eating, walking, talking, and I'm dyslexic. And I had I've kind of been sort of tortured by this disability for, much of my life up until then. And my dad kind of liked to rub it in. And if I did anything cool, he would just sort of screw me back down into the ground. And I explained this to Faye, and she's angry, and she's like, you must do something about it. Go in there and speak to him. I'll go in there and speak to him. And I'm like, no, because I want this to be about Oscar. And do you know what? I'm just too tired. I'm too tired. I got bigger fish to fry right now. I've got mothering shit to do. And she was, I had to kind of quieten her down. But I carried this kind of dyslexic thing, and the fact that I was told at school, that high school, at the age of 14, that I wasn't smart enough to stay on at school past 16, so I had to leave, and perhaps I should go be good with my hands. And what did I like doing with my hands? And I thought, I kind of like cooking, and I like making cakes sometimes, like lots of people do. And so the career advisor said, okay, go be a chef or something. And I thought, hey, I'll do that then, because like, what else am I going to do? And I did that for a couple of years. I left school at 16, went to chef school, hated it, hated chefing, everything about it. I kind of like food, but hated being a chef. But I was lucky. I was very lucky. I was saved by my guardian angel, all the story for another day. Got to go to university, got to graduate with a food science degree. Yay, wonderful whistles and bows. And I've led a not too shabby life, actually. But 15 years after this incident, sat in the living room with my dad. I'm sat in my now living room in the US. And I'm sat there and with my husband and my kids, my teenage kids, and my mum, my dad, they're visiting from the UK. And we've had a really nice night. And my dad's kind of behaved himself. And we're just having a nightcap before we go to bed. And my dad turns to my husband, Steve. And now what you must know about my husband, Steve, is that he's a really good guy, really nice guy. I really like him, at least. And but for my dad, as far as my dad's concerned, the sun rises, shines, and sets from Steve's arse. And I don't think that's all that fair, because I would like just a few rays of sun, and maybe I'm a little bit jealous, yeah? Anyways, my dad turns to Steve and says, oh, Steve, oh yeah, tell me. So, and he asked him this sort of question about like food science and about nutrition or something. And Steve says, oh, Dennis, that's not my level of, that's not my expertise. That's Anna's expertise. You should ask her. And I'm like, yeah, Dad, remember, I have a food science degree. I'm a food scientist. And he turns to me and he looks at me and he goes, domestic science. And I'm like, and it gets me again, even though I had practiced with my therapist what to say when he does stuff like this to me. And I'm supposed to say, oh yeah, so what does that say about you? Oh, Dad, that wasn't very nice. But again, it escapes me because I'm just not expecting it. And I'm like, and I look to my mum and she says nothing, like normal. And I turn to Steve and he sort of squirms and looks uncomfortable. And I'm willing him to say something and he doesn't say anything. And I'm like, ugh. And I leave the room and I go up to bed and I don't sleep. All night, I lay there. I'm so angry and tossing and turning. I'm like 45 years old and still I'm being crushed by my dad. And when Steve comes to bed, I tell him, oh, you shouldn't have let that happen. And why didn't you say something? You should speak up. Otherwise, you're just complicit. And of course, he feels bad and he agrees and he feels awkward. And I said, tomorrow, you are going to speak to my dad and you're going to tell him what he does and how it makes me feel. And he kind of, because I guess he knows what's good for him, agreed. And the next morning, I go downstairs. My dad's making tea. And he looks up at me and he says, do you want a cup of tea? And I'm like, no, I don't want a cup of tea. Right, you and me, we're going out for a walk. Get your coat. And so I get my coat on and I'm like a pressure cooker, like ready to just go. And we get to the end of the drive and a mushroom cloud appears over the town where I live. because it's me. And I explode and I scream and I shout at my dad and I tell him everything he said to me over the years and how mean he is and how it's made me feel and how he said that I deserved to be bullied in school because I'm so annoying, and how he was surprised that no one had come along and punched me for being so annoying. And I told him this stuff, and to everything I said to him, he said, I did not say that. I would not say that. And I remember saying to him, you are a fucking liar. I said every swear word I could think of, but apart from the C word, I'm pretty sure I didn't say that. Anyways, I get to the point and I say, Dad, if you can't check that stuff in at the airport when you come and visit me, you are not welcome. Do not set foot in my house again. And he collected himself and he said, well, I suppose your mum could always come by herself. Second mushroom cloud appeared over the town where I came from. And I actually don't remember what I said at this point, but I do know that I turned on my heels and I ran and I'm sobbing and and I wanted to go somewhere where no one could find me. And I knew I could go to this park where he didn't know where I'd be. And I sat there for hours, like while the kids were at school, and I got sunburn all down my face and the side of my neck. And I finally went home, came upstairs, called Steve, said, you're taking him out for a pint tonight and you will tell him what he's like. And you will tell him that he does do this to me, how it makes me feel. And so he agreed. And that's what he did. And I heard them come back that evening and I didn't go downstairs. And the next morning I go downstairs and my dad is in the kitchen making tea. And he looks up at me and he's crying. He's sobbing and trying to hold his breath so he doesn't sob too much. And he looks at me and he says, Steve, he spoke to me last night and he told me what I said, apparently what I said. And if he says that I said that, then, well, it must be true. And I'm really sorry. And he starts to sob. And I think this is amazing because I do love my dad and I want everything to be okay. And I actually want to put my arms around him and give him a cuddle and then everything be okay. In the few years since that happened, that happened just before my dad was 80. A miracle has happened and he's actually quit being an arsehole. He's actually quite nice. And every now and again, when you can feel him getting a bit agitated, he will go to say something. But I find that if I leap in and go, sorry, Dad, what was that? Did you want to say something? Everybody, I think Dad's trying to say something. And he shuts right up. It's pretty cool. So maybe leopards can change their spots. But I was standing in that kitchen and I wanted to put my arms around him and give him a big squeezy hug and have a cry. But he stops me and he says, I just want to say, Anna, I just want to say, I am really proud of you. And this is like more than I could ever imagine. And now I really want to grab him and give him a hug and have a cry. And again, he stops me and he puts his hands out and he goes, and I'm like, what could this be? And he says, I am really proud of you. You've done a really good job in marrying Steve. Thanks.
I'm sorry. Oh my God, I didn't know the last line. And I know Steve, he's lovely, but you're a superstar. I also just love that tea is so British. It's all over tea. But I'm so happy you found, you're an amazing chef and you're an amazing storyteller, and we are all lucky to know you. So thank you. Can I invite my friends, other producers, all back on the show now? We just saw a comment that I didn't see that coming. I know, who saw that coming? Talk about the beautiful pregnant pause. So thanks, ladies. It's fun to have a ladies' night of storytelling. Yeah, lots of love. I have a first question, but people that are watching YouTube, Facebook, wherever you are in the universe, feel free to put a comment. We will get those to the different producers. But I just have a question. Has being a producer or a storyteller made you better at the other? And if so, what's one way? that you've become better? Don't all jump in.
I'll go first if that's okay. Totally, being a producer has made me a better storyteller. I feel, because I am honored to listen to so many storytellers, and I get to listen to so many amazing storytellers, all these masterful storytellers, and everybody has a different way, a style, a way of doing things. And I'm constantly thinking, oh, I see what you did there. That's really cool. Or that doesn't work. And then I have to try and figure out why. So I think it has exponentially made me a better storyteller, and I'm thankful for that.
I love that. And I'll give the other side of that equation. So I started as a storyteller and then became a producer. And I think starting as a storyteller has made me a much better producer, because I'm so aware of how incredibly vulnerable people are when they tell stories. And so I'm always thinking about that as a producer, as a coach, because people come to you and they just, they kind of bleed in front of you. And, you have to be prepared to hold some of that. So I think for me, the times that I've had shitty experiences as a storyteller, either because the producer was a jerk or there was just something off about the show, I always can take that away and remind myself that as a producer, you have this awesome, awesome responsibility to make sure you're caring not just for the story, but for the storyteller. And that feels great. And it's so nice to have this conversation with all of these producers who do that. I would drive to the end of the earth for Donna Galluzzo to be a part of a show that she does, because she just, from the second you walk in the door, she cares about the storyteller, not just the story.
She is in Maine, which is like the end of the earth.
Exactly. I think I did actually one time drive through a blizzard to get to a Soundbites storytelling event.
Yeah, so Donna, what is it for you? What's been your lesson?
I think, it's interesting. Great question, by the way. I always think, I think I'm a better producer than I am storyteller. And I'm always in awe of people who do both really well, because I think it's very difficult to do both really well. And, Cheryl, I always love and admire you. I don't know Cyndi and Anna, except it's our first time meeting tonight. Sue, you're on my pedestal of who I aspire to be. So I am humbled every time I do a show, and I like taking care of people. And y'all should come do something when we're up and running again, because I do think I'm not good with complimenting myself, but I think we produce a good show at Soundbites.
You do.
Yeah.
Cyndi, how about yourself? Producing versus telling, did one serve the other for you in a meaningful way?
Who are you talking to?
Who are you talking to? Cyndi.
So what, as Susanne said, I really, man, you nailed it in a way that was so eloquent that all I can say is yes, this idea of caring for the soul. And I do think that coming to the production side as a performer, I'm just very, very cautious, especially when somebody comes to us, because the stories can be so raw that, there's that point where I'm like, I'm taking my producer hat off here and checking in with you as a person. And, and then there's also those points where, it's like a long wait. And I'm always saying, I know that the waiting is nerve-wracking, and feel free to reach out to me if it's taken too long. And I'm never annoyed when somebody nudges me, because I know when you're hoping and you're hoping and you're hoping because you want something, you want to get on. So I think being a performer has certainly made me a compassionate producer. But I do think that being a producer has certainly made me, the impact is I'm a better storyteller, especially as a story coach, because I'm consistently giving the same notes about structure, about painting pictures with your words, about don't forget to use dialogue. So that part of me lives in the back of my head and reminds me, do it in dialogue, and things like that. So the notes I give others kind of come home to roost as I craft stories and tell them. But Susanne, I just want to say, yeah, like what you said.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got some amazing questions. I'll just say from a ditto, right? Ditto. I also, there's a point where it's not, a producer wants a great show, right? Full stop. We want lots of people to come back. We want all that. But at some point, it's like, it's not our story. If it's not what I would say is perfect, which there really is no thing, it's okay, because if that's how they want to tell it, that's what they want to share, like we have to honor that too. Briefly, MJ's asking, if you started first as a storyteller, what was your journey to becoming a producer? Because we have a lot of questions, can you give the highlights, like maybe the leapfrog version?
Again, for myself, or?
Yeah, sure. We'll start.
It was actually, I was an actor and found stand-up, which gave me freedom because I could get on stage anytime I wanted to. And it was in Boston when stand-up was like the biggest thing. So it was actually a really inspiring scene in the 1980s. But as I was going further into doing this work, there was a lot of sexism, a lot of understanding that women aren't funny. So when my mother said it, I'm like, but also, I moved to Hollywood. There was a lot of casting couch stuff. And I just remember saying to a friend of mine at some point, do you think I could produce my own stuff? Because if I produce my own stuff, I wouldn't hire somebody who would harass me. So I started producing solo shows. I started producing shows. And so by the time I was teaching, I first got my job teaching for the Moth as a volunteer for their community program and loved it. And then Dawn Fraser, who I know is watching, when the people at Risk and Story Studio needed someone to instruct, she's like, Cyndi, what do you want the job? And I was like, yes. And then when they had the need for a coach or somebody on the production side, well, I'd been producing my own work for years. So, it's like I had all of these skills, but the skills were born out of, I wanted control over who I dealt with and who had power over me. And luckily for me, with Risk and Story Studio, I work for two fantastic human beings. So they might be in charge, but I love working for them. So that's Kevin Allison and JC Cassis.
Anybody else want to answer the leapfrog version?
I started out, it didn't start out. I'm a, full confession, I'm a therapist. And I know that's sort of shocking to people when they hear it. They're like, no, that can't be true. But for me, I started out as a storyteller and then was approached to be a producer. I was approached to be a host and then hosted for a while and then was approached to be a producer. So it wasn't something that I sort of set my sights on, but it felt like a very logical transition. And I can remember one time sitting with a storyteller and somebody saying like how like storytelling and therapy is like so far apart. And then it's not really, it's really, for 25 years, I sat with people in confidence for them telling their stories. And really, this is sort of the flip side of that. And the work that I do now is a lot of kind of therapeutic storytelling. I work with folks with trauma and folks that don't think about storytelling as a therapeutic process. But really, it's so much better when you think about, don't just sit in a room and tell somebody your secrets. Mm-hmm. If you can get up and tell people and people can hear your voice, that is incredibly empowering. So for me as a producer, I'm almost doing the same kind of work. I'm helping people find their voice. I'm helping people feel confident. I'm helping people say, no, I'm not going to put up with that shit anymore. So it kind of was a logical fit, but it's not something I didn't set out to be like, I want to be a producer. No. No, it's frustrating. Something always goes wrong. Somebody always does weird shit.
Yeah, I feel like Ann and I fail in the producing role the way many people with small nonprofits and storytelling do, which is more people want to tell than produce. Like someone's got to volunteer. Someone's got to pass out the slips of paper at the beginning of the night. And we started falling into it. And then we were approached. And then Stories from the Stage grew out of a show we did live at WGBH, and then GBH said, let's turn this to a national TV show. It just became really organic. And then, Cyndi, I can really relate to you. This show that I produced, Suitcase Stories, came out of a place that there just isn't enough diversity across shows. And I know this is a bad example right here, except that sometimes you want your 5 friends around a microphone. But I just think that you don't hear enough Burmese storytellers, you don't hear enough Guatemalan storytellers, and people from Liberia. Like, you just don't. And so I started Suitcase Stories out of frustration, and but I also found it was a way to get non-immigrants and refugees connected to immigrants and refugees, because we said, will you do some cross coaching? Will you be on stage with people? Right. And so I think we have an obligation to make sure to lift those voices. But anything you want to add, Donna or Anna? We've got other questions if you want
to. You can ask the question, or I can add. I don't know.
Go ahead.
I got into producing really. I fell into it. It was one of those like chance things. I was kind of new to Boston. I wanted to find my niche kind of thing. I fell into the storytelling thing just by the need to tell a story that was burning through my head. I just needed to tell it. That's what happened. And it kind of, this whole world opened up, not just of like telling and listening and sharing, but of also this it was Math Mouth that really got me, and Cheryl really inspired me with Suitcase Stories. That was the first storytelling show I ever went to, way before I even knew Cheryl. And it blew me away. The power of storytelling to transform and to share and to persuade, all this stuff that you all know, just blew me away. And I wanted to have a piece of it and be part of it. So that's how I got producing.
Nice. I love this next question. Sorry, Donna, but just in the interest of time, someone said, if someone has fear or anxiety about performing, what advice would you give to help someone succeed? I think all of us, let's be honest, have a little fear and anxiety, but Cyndi, take it.
Actually, I'm a person who used to suffer with debilitating stage fright, and I have created a one-sheet handout, which Cheryl, I can send to you, and then you could share with them, or if you could throw my email up there, Abby, email me for it and I'll get it to you. But it's the gist of it is it's about relabeling fear. So fear, you're afraid because you care about whatever it is you are about to do. Like if you're storytelling, you care about the story, you care about tributing people well. If you're in a play, you care about your cast, and you care. So you care, and so you're afraid. Or you care about the audience. People have spend some money or just turn on the computer, like they're taking their time with you. You want them to have a good time. So it's actually love. So if you are able to say, I love them and I love this story and I love these people and I just want them to have, and you take it off yourself. It is not about, am I good? Who cares? Like, I don't want to watch somebody they're so talented. It's not about your talent. It's about the person listening's experience. And the people you're tributing and sharing whatever it is, that you're sharing. So it doesn't matter how talented you are. It's all about them. And when you put that energy on them, you got the big heart, which is why you're scared. So just make it love. The amount of fear you feel is equal to the amount of charisma you can have.
Anybody add to that?
That's actually, I'm going to add to that because I think that question was my cousin. I think my cousin in New York answered that question. So Alex, if that is you, I love you. And thank you so much for tuning in. And so I would add, Cyndi, absolutely. It's all about love. And what I would add is my grandmother, who came to watch me perform for the first time when I was in 6th grade. I was a drummer. And she came to watch me perform, and I was so debilitated by fear that I was like, I can't do this. And my grandmother pulled me aside, and she, and everybody was like, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. And I was like, I can't. And my grandmother said, bring the fear with you. Like, fear is there for a reason. And so don't push the fear away. Embrace that fear. Bring that fear with you. Bring fear all the way with you until you get to stage. And then look at fear and say, you know what? I want you to just hang on for a couple of minutes. This is my time. And as soon as I'm done, I will address everything you need. And then she said, and don't be surprised that once you are on stage and you start going, that fear won't be waiting in the wings, because fear doesn't usually hang around for the whole performance. It's just there for the beginning. And I got out on stage and I did my thing, and I never forgot that.
Oh, wow.
And so when I teach people, I teach them to like, bring that fear with you. It's important. Don't try to push it away. Hold it closer, because it will actually fuel you and bring you farther. So, so Alex, that was your great grandmother that said that, and I'm happy to talk more about it.
Awesome. So I have a question. I'm going to combine a couple. Let's talk like practical, and then just like second part, which is if you want to get on your show, very quickly, what's the pitch process? But the follow-up that I think was really important that someone asked was, but what if I pitch a story and you in your gut feel like I might have a better story? Do you have producers counter and say what else you got, or you spend the time, waste the time? Like, what's your process? Donna, sound bites. How do I get on the stage? And how do you work?
We're still, Soundbites is still working out kind of our public pitch process, because we would have been in our 5th season. So one thing that's been huge for us, and I guess I would just say as a general comment, a little bit off topic, but the community of storytellers that exists, like all the shows that you're hearing everybody talk about tonight, this is an amazing community. And we have gone into that community time and again and asked people to come and perform. I'm always jaw dropped at how far people will travel to come and be with us, and how much they will, take themselves out of it and put ego aside and say, yeah, I'll do that for that amount of money. I don't care. Like, they're always like, oh God. That's why we try to make great hospitality here in Maine. But honestly, it's just like, the amount of love that this storytelling community has for each other is amazing. And it's a way to grow and learn. It's a way to deal with your fear. It's a way to grow your show. It's a way to become a better producer. Like, this is a community unlike any other. And I hope people just tap into it more and more and more, because it's a very magical group of people. It's really amazing.
So Donna, if someone pitches to you and you feel like they have a better story, are you someone to ask, or do you let people choose what comes to you?
A little bit of both. I mean, I've actually been in the situation where I was going to tell a story and then I kind of pitched a change at the last minute and I freaked the other producer out. And then they were like, okay, I'm just going to let you do your thing. And it worked out really, they were like, oh, that worked out great. But I think you have to listen to, so much about storytelling is making a connection, following what's in your heart. And so, there's the fear of the stage and all the excitement and all that. But then there's another very big part of that feeling where, if you're not doing what you're connected to in your heart, if you're not talking about that, then you're not going to be as vibrant on stage. So I think you have to listen to that. You might need some corralling and some gentle nudging in a direction, but I think it's really good to tap into that really inner voice and go with it, whether you have to speak up for it or whether you have to nudge somebody and say, I saw you spark when you talked about that.
Yeah.
Producer too, right? So
how does someone get on the Moth, and what's your approach?
The Moth is just this whole other beast. So, the Moth has a pitch line and people can call in. You can show up at a story slam. We are still doing some story slams online, but, once we're through this 29 cities around the world, you show up, you put your name in the hat. We've got a theme. If you've got a story, do it. For the shows that I produce outside of the Moth, I don't do a pitch line. I think similar to Donna, I will approach people that I think have a good story. I also welcome people to approach me, and I don't ask people to pitch, because this weird thing happens when you say, pitch me a story, and then people only tell you that one single sliver. As opposed to, hey, I heard you're a storyteller. I want to have a conversation with you. And then I want to engage people in a conversation, and I want to talk about the theme, and I want to just see if a couple of stories come out, and then have a conversation about how do we craft, what you have so that you can have the best possible version of the story that you want on stage. And as a storyteller, I very rarely pitch. you know, most of the storytelling work I do is people approach me and that's work because I've put in the time.
Yep.
But this weird thing happens when people pitch, and it's you don't always get the best story. And I think Donna has worked with enough people to know that you sort of say, you know, what are your possibilities for this theme? And if you're willing as a producer and you have the time to spend with people, you don't always have the time. Sometimes like, I got a show, I got to get 5 people on there. Give me the 3-second version of your story and I'm going to tell you yes or no. So
Anna, in the interest of time, Anna, can you speak briefly? So the Stories from the Stage, which is the show Tell&Act now produces and was Mass Mouth, we do have a pitch line. People do approach us. People tell tellers to tell us to talk to us. But Anna, we do something I think that also other shows do, but it's very deliberate for us. Can you talk about us going out and finding stories? Because we spend a lot of time with that, given our desire for diversity and for new voices.
Absolutely. We are constantly now COVID times COVID in to slams all over the country and other people's shows, and non-COVID times we would be like hovering around the back of the rooms. We have spies everywhere to the ground, but it's particularly cool at the moment because, you know, we can just like nip out to Chicago on Zoom or like down to San Francisco, and there is like, you know, all you guys know, there's this incredible wealth of diverse, cool, happening hit talent out there. So we, as I'm sure you all are, or you know, some of you are still doing Zoom shows, I'm kind of mining that. It's so cool. It's exciting times, but I do miss everybody in person.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking about how, so with our shows, we get themes like other people do early in the season, and we're thinking about for ourselves what kind of stories do we want to hear too. So for example, Anna and I just produced a show on the theme of Good Trouble in honor of John Lewis, and none of the people on the show had been storytellers. We made a commitment to feature people, so we found a gentleman from Selma, the Penobscot ambassador from Maine, and then a woman who was a neurologist from Puerto Rico. And they all were like, I've never done this. And I mean, as all of the people on this call agree, everyone has a story. It's just confidence and trust that people want to hear it. And so there's many doors into the field, but I agree with what everyone's saying is that you need to get out there and talk to people like this. Just meet the personalities. We're all friendly. We all know how it feels to be back scenes. But Cyndi, do you want to say quickly anything about getting on a risk show? Because your pitches, we
have a process, and I hear, you know, man, I wish I had time because my favorite thing is to sit and chat with people. But the casting team is me and Brad, you know, and we tour the show, not just nationally, but we go into Canada, we go into the UK. So the pitch line, we need it.
Yeah.
There's no option. And pitching itself is an art. So you could be a great story and not, you know, and we try to read through the lines when it comes to the pitches, but we ask for a synopsis in about 300 words, or a recording of a synopsis in 5 minutes or less. And then Risk has a very specific aesthetic on the stories you thought you'd never dare share in public. Take a risk, tell that story. So we're constantly on the lookout for, you know, there's those pitches where it's like, there's something here. Well, let's just get a 15-minute recording from them. So, but it's that and there is that question of, do we ask for other ideas? I say, yeah, often you'll get somebody where it's like, wow, in one paragraph, you nailed this. Like, this is great. But it's a story that you could tell to high school kids or elementary school kids. Pitch that one to other shows. In fact, here are those shows. And then for us, we're looking for the daring story. So we even when we pass on stories, we often will, say, give us other ideas. And then sometimes we will actually forward those stories to other shows. Cheryl, I know I've done that with you. I know I've forwarded some people to Story Collider and The Moth and things like that as well.
Yeah.
But I do agree. The best way to get the story is have a chat.
Yeah. And even we taught a class last year about how to pitch. I mean, because many places say pitch, but we could do a whole thing on that. We are over time, but I didn't. We had so many good questions. I wanted to honor that, and plus, I like seeing all of you. I cannot wait until we're a person again. But for a final question, on a really personal note, like, why do you spend your time doing this for you? Like, we all have a lot of choices of things we can do. Why is this how you devote your time, producing or telling?
Oof.
I know, God, I'm just gonna stuck the knife in and then turn it.
I have the best job in the world. You know, I get to present stories now and share a bit about myself and feel like I'm part of a community and I'm heard and I am seen. I also get to listen. I get to ask all of those questions that in polite society you're not supposed to ask, because you're talking to people who are open, who really want to share. And I was a recovering shy person. Finding my authentic voice changed my life. I did so by the time I was about 28. So to help people or to encourage people, just be you. It's like every day I'm doing exactly what I feel I was put here to do.
Anybody else want to? Donna, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I guess it's really simple for me. Like, I think as an adult, I realized I grew up in a very fortunate circumstance that every evening around the dinner table, it was storytelling. That's just it. That's what we like lived and breathed and like got up with it and went to bed with it. And it was really special. And when you realize you grow up a certain way or you have been introduced to something organically and it's an amazing, beautiful gift, it's just like and then I started telling stories about my family. And I think getting into this has all been about the gift of recreating that feeling, because it is a gift for those of us who produce. It's a gift for the audience. It's a gift for the storyteller. Everybody gets something so amazing out of it. And to be able to have people recreate that feeling and to be able to give those different feelings to the different integral parts of an evening, that's pretty magical. That's why I do it.
Anna?
I would add, like, I totally agree with Cyndi and also Donna about what you just said. Like, what you said was really powerful. For me, yeah, I would agree that this is the best job in the world. But I also am a bit of a nomad. You know, I've lived on 3 continents and I always seek and find connection wherever it is. But the coolest thing about moving around is with all these different people. And, you know, I once told a story about them and us, and what them and us looks like, and how if you move around and you listen and you speak to people, you become us. And this is like a beautiful thing. For me, storytelling makes us us. You know, we share our kind of innermost thoughts and feelings and the crazy stuff, and we learn and we come together and we kind of are connected. So that's kind of one of the coolest things for me.
Sue?
Yeah, all of that. You know, I think storytelling is the gift that we are all going to bring to the revolution. Like, for me, it's about connection, and, you know, our survival, especially over the last 4 years, I think depends on us being able to be in a room with people that we may not think we have any commonality with, and finding that piece, finding that thread that allows us to talk about our experience. And so, you know, there's just this deep, deep thing that happens in a live room when you're listening to someone's story. And, you know, for me as a producer, it's always, you know, it's great sort of what happens on stage and the stories that you hear. And for me, it's always what happens afterwards. It's that one person that, you know, makes their way across the room to say to a storyteller, wow, I was so moved by what you said. Let me tell you my story. The best feedback you get as a storyteller is not, that was a great story. It's somebody that comes up to you and says, that reminds me of my grandmother, and let me tell you my story. That is like storyteller gold. That wait a lifetime for, is that, you know, that one little elderly person that kind of totters across the room and grabs your elbow and is like, let me tell you my story.
Mhm.
You know, and it's hard to get that right now with COVID. I have hope that we will get there again. And whoo, man, that's going to be a party. That's going to be a party in Brunswick, Maine when that happens. And it's going to be a party in Boston, and it's going to be a party in New York. And, you know, when we're all in the same room again together, feeling that connection, it's going to be a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess I always just say that I'm saying my piece and I'm asking people to say theirs. And I mean that both PIECE and PEACE. That's how I started. I just had something I had to say to the world and I got it out. And now I just feel like I try to give other people the same chance. I mean, that's what it's for me. Oh God, we could go on and on. We've already gone over. We're learning. It's our first show producing. I want to thank all you amazing ladies. I want to thank all of you checked in. I got a couple final announcements. Cyndi is literally teaching the 21st and the 22nd, a 5-hour course on storytelling for business. Check her out. It's amazing. You'll learn a ton from Cyndi. Go to her website. It's all in the chat through the Story Space.
Story Studio. It's storystudio.org.
Story Studio. I was about to talk about Story Space. There's so many stories. Next month, we've got 4 more producers. I'm going to tune in and tell stories and talk about their craft. We've got Scott Schultz from Los Angeles, California with Busted. We've got Karen, oh my God, I just blanked on her last name, Anna. Help me out. Sorry. From The Truth Is, down in Virginia. We've got the Story Space, Ruth Marcus here locally in Boston, and Ken Green with the Story Studio Boston. So many great tellers out there. So come back. It's the 3rd Monday of every month, the producers, and I will make a final pitch. When I think about why I do this work, Saturday night for me will be fundamentally why I do this work. We have another suitcase story show, but this one features a woman I've worked with for 2.5 years who finally has decided to tell her story, and she just got elected to a state representative in the state of Massachusetts as the first Cambodian American in the country. So, she deserves a party and she can't have one. So party online with us as she bravely shares her journey at suitcasestories.org, and check out Tell&Act. And Abby, we went overtime. I messed up posting. You're amazing. We love Passim, and have a great night, everybody. Have a great night. Thank you.
That was fantastic for our inaugural new storytelling series with Tell&Act. Thank you, Cheryl, for hosting. Thanks to all of our guests. As Cheryl said, we're going to have a new slate of producers next month. So be sure to come back. You'll hear some new stories and get a chance to ask some more questions of more folks that are doing this work and promoting storytelling and getting everyone involved. If you want to go back and check out the chat, you can see everyone's links to all their projects, all their sites. If you are a storyteller or an aspiring storyteller, you can reach out to these folks and get some great help. If you enjoyed the show tonight, I'd also suggest that you go to passim.org/stream and you can make a donation. Donations will be split between Passim for hosting and for Tell&Act for putting on this show. If you enjoyed the show, please do donate, comment, let us know how you liked tonight. If you have ideas for the future, we're really looking forward to continuing this series through these times that we're separated and when we get back in the club. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Have a great night, everybody.